Let's get it. What's going on, my people? You see the Blackburn right there. Always representing that. Jack Blackburn, one of the greatest fighters ever. If you didn't know, nope. Something from a dog there. If you didn't know, now you know. Jack Blackburn, Chappie, trainer of Joe Louis, Sammy Mandel, among others. Oh, yeah. So shout out to everyone. Joshua here, 86Boxing, representing. Hey, I'm happy to be here in the building. Just wanted to do a little something right there. No, not necessarily a particular subject as I had previously done. That being said, it is what it is. I appreciate everyone. Appreciate everyone who's here in the mix. And hey, you are appreciated. That's what you need to know. You are appreciated there. So thank you all who will be joining, those who will be watching the replay, etc. You know, we're gonna try and talk about a little bit of boxing. We're gonna talk a little bit of boxing, baby. Boxing history, that is, and whatever else comes across the screen, generally speaking. Shout out to my man Rodolfo Rivera Jr. Rodolfo Rivera Jr. in the mix here. Appreciate you there, Rodolfo. Be sure to go check him out, folks. Be sure to subscribe to the channel over there, Rodolfo. I'm sure is going to be making some things at some point, probably fairly soon. You never know. With that being said, I'm here to support, show some love. It is what it is, you know? It is what it is. Shout out to my man, TD Sports Talk. Thomas holding it down from the Bronx. Salute there to you. Salute there to you, repping PR. Says, what's good, 86 Boxing? Salute, bro. Salute there to you, Thomas, as well. Appreciate you dropping by there, buddy. Hey, folks, take a second. Go drop by Thomas's channel, TD Sports Talk. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. Turn on those notifications. I think you'll appreciate it. A lot of good content that he drops over there on that end. So you want to be in the mix for sure. So I suggest you go check that out as soon as possible. Appreciate you dropping by here, Thomas. And appreciate everyone in the mix here. Those, as mentioned, listening, those that are live. Matter of fact, I need to cut on the little Facebook thing because, you know, they switched it up. You have to turn on the audience over there on the Facebook end. But that being said, man, it's just appreciated. Busy times, crazy times, busy times, a lot going on for sure. Still trying to make that time for the boxing love, all that good stuff that goes on, you know, and boxing history, of course, is one of those key points in areas of emphasis. We get some talk in relation to boxing history. Some would argue not enough, but history is for the living, and I'm a fan of it. I love the history side of things, and I know that there are others who love the history side of things as well. And that's why I'm here, and that's why I want to keep it dialed in as it relates to such. So it's another Wednesday, boxing history every night. We're going to talk about it. Shout out to my man, Paul Bright. Semper Fidelis there to you. Paul Bright says, what's up, Josh? Salute. Appreciate you, Paul Bright. As always, great to have you here, buddy. Semper Fi, as mentioned, holding it down for the Marines out there. So shout out to the Marines, all my fellow veterans out there who served the country. Hey, you are appreciated. You 100% appreciated. Just know that you're getting here from me direct. So appreciate you all dropping by. Salute to my man, Dan. Dan dropped by to salute to you. Dan says, Brother Josh, hey, appreciate you there, Brother Dan. The man holding it down. Appreciate you. As always, love to talk to history, and I appreciate the dialogue, info, etc. that you shared there, Dan. So, you know, we'll keep this thing going. And hey, this is not necessarily a particular subject as it relates to boxing history. I'm just, hey, here to talk boxing history in general. So that's about any forms of boxing history. You know, the eras I generally prefer, like, and cover. With that being said, you can consider it a Q&A as well, but we're talking boxing history and all things that go on in that space as it pertains to boxing. So much love to all those that have an interest in such. So with that in mind, feel free to, if you have any questions, any specific things, subjects, points, topics, areas you want to cover from a boxing perspective, boxing history perspective, that is, drop them in the chat or whatever, and we'll talk about them for sure. And this is going to be all off the top. So if I know, I'll know. If I don't, I guess I don't right there. I guess I don't, so it is what it is. Looks like I need to make a little adjustment to my actual background as well. See, a little bit off, just a little bit off, but it's at 86Boxing on everything: YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Blue Sky, Instagram, Pinterest, and then the website, of course, www.86boxing.com. So I'll start with this right here, of course, is have this book up for grabs right here. I'm going to do a random draw, and it's for the Jack Dillon book, recently written, published, and distributed by the great Mark Allen Baker, boxing historian extraordinaire. Great writer, provides a lot of good detailed info and content on it. So this is up for grabs. Be sure to hit up the website, 86boxing.com. You can sign up for the chance to win this book here, specifically autographed by Mark Allen Baker. Great man right there, and I appreciate it. And I enjoy being able to call him a friend. Mark Allen Baker, the Jack Dillon book. So be sure to go sign up for that for sure. It'll be cool. And as a matter of fact, I can tell you just from what I've seen and kind of covered thus far in the book in itself, Jack Dillon, one of those guys with a hell of a resume. I mean, top tier, especially in the early part of his career, which is where I'm still at, that early portion of his career generally. But it varies, or it's different from a modern fighter, because early career for fighters of this nature back then, they vastly differ from fighters of today because there's less activity, of course. I mean, this guy has been in the ring with the likes of within 4 years, the likes of George Chip, Frank Klaus, freaking Bob Moha, who else? Freaking just a number of fighters that are top level there. Those are just a few of them, but all of this, battling Levinsky, I mean, it's freaking crazy. His resume is absolutely insane. You wouldn't believe it unless you actually dive through, read the book, and gain that understanding, something I'm still in the process of right here at this very second. So that's a book worth checking out. You can get a chance to get an autographed copy that was sent to me by Mark Allen Baker himself. I think you will enjoy it, especially if you enjoy the history. And Jack Dillon, man, a hell of a fighter there. Outside of just a resume in itself, just one of those fighters who was explosive. He could box, he could scrap it out, he could do what he needed to do to get over the top and gain that edge. And he had that mental capacity as well, in terms of nothing could break him. He was willing and able, and that's what put him in a position to be one of the greatest that the sport has seen, nicknamed the Giant Slayer, and that's for a reason, because he wasn't afraid to step in there with anyone of any size, and more often than not, he was going to get the nod in that regard. So I just wanted to shout that out. Shout out to my man Josh Taylor. Says, salute, my friend. Appreciate you there, Josh Taylor. Thanks for dropping by there, buddy. Be sure to go check out Josh Taylor, my fellow Josh right there. Always a shout out to the Joshes of this world. But appreciate you being here. Again, we're just talking random boxing history just in general. We're just talking about some of the things that go on in the sport, etc. And, work it from there. So appreciate you there, Josh Taylor. And salute there to you, Thomas. TD Sports Talk, as mentioned. Be sure to check them out, folks. And everyone sending their regards. Dan, appreciate you sending your regards. Paul, Thomas, etc. Everyone. So it is appreciated. Shout out to Melissa Ty. Melissa Ty dropped in there and says, hello, good people. Appreciate you there, Melissa Ty. That is so funny that you had dropped by the mix here. We're talking boxing history, Melissa. If you have any questions, anything of that nature related to just random boxing history, feel free to drop it there, Melissa. Know that you are appreciated for sure. Thank you. We got ladies in the house, or at least a lady in the house. So hey, big time. That's good stuff right there. Brought a smile to my face 100% there, Melissa. Good stuff. Good stuff there. Be sure to check her out. She said, let me think there. All right, I'll let you think there, Melissa. Let you think. But hey, it's just anything. Boxing history, we're on it. Dan says, Harry Greb, Frank Claus, Hugo Kelly, one of the greatest resumes in history. Dylan, a phenomenal fighter. Yes, indeed. That is correct there. Man, you just think about that. Just look at those names right there. Harry Greb, Frank Claus, Hugo Kelly. These are individuals that Jack Dillon was in addition to some of the names I already mentioned right there. But just think about that. World champions. He was no stranger to world champions, Jack Dillon, that is. And that didn't stop him from doing his thing. He was around 5'7", 5'8", somewhere in the mix there. I have to double back, but I believe it was somewhere around there, 5'7", 5'8". But you couldn't tell him. He was a slayer of giants. So it didn't matter the size. He just had something about him. And sometimes you just have that thing inside, that little extra girth, that extra that takes you to that next level, because there comes a time when all of the physical attributes, they go by the wayside. Then it's the mental that gets you through a contest, especially at that elite level, because when you're in there with someone else who has the physical attributes, they may be some that contrast with your specific physical attributes. Then it comes down to that mental. Will you continue to hold your guard? Will you continue to operate in the right spaces? Will you continue to maintain your distance? Will you continue to throw the best shots in the best situations, or will you let that go by the wayside? And sometimes fatigue, that can alter the mind, and you start to lose a bit of steam in some of the things that got you to where you are and or were. So that's something to keep in mind right there. But Jack Dillon, he was in with those guys. Harry Greb, Frank Claus, Hugo Kelly. Of course, Greb, Frank Claus, world champions. Hugo Kelly, I don't think he was a world champion. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Dan, but I don't think Hugo won a world title. I could be wrong. But you can let me know, Dan. I know you know a little bit more about it. And I had to dive into Hugo Kelly a bit more, but he's got some impressive names on his resume. That I can tell you for sure. That I can surely tell you. But we know the deal with Harry Greb. There's a couple of videos out there on the channel. Frank Claus, he's come up in some videos on some other fighters I've profiled. And trust me when I tell you, one of the best that the sport has seen. He has the look and everything when you see him there, as far as the pictures and all that stuff. Now, I think there's a little bit of video out there. But that being said, amazing fighters. And, of course, Jack Dillon was in there. The Who's Your Bearcat, the Giant Slayer. So hit up 86boxing.com as mentioned. Sign up to get that book. Dan says hi. Josh Taylor says, Ritty Monaghan, 1948 flyweight champion. I know you mentioned him before, Josh Taylor. I looked him up. I haven't dove into him enough to provide sort of a real kind of researched and thought out idea of the fighter that he was, but flyweight champion, and that's a division that we've seen some top level greats. I actually saw a post where someone said Jimmy Wild was overrated. When I think about flyweights, I'm like, oh my goodness. But yeah, craziness out there. But that being said, Rinty Monaghan right there. I know you've mentioned it before, Josh Taylor. By this next time around, I'm definitely going to make sure I have him in taps in terms of understanding just how good or great, I suppose great of a fighter this man was, considering he was a world champion in a pretty active and very relevant time frame in history, And some consider 1950s and beyond the sort of modern era. And anything below that, pre-modern era, I guess it's arguable. And we've got a lot of time and space in between us at this particular point. But 1948, I mean, just think about that, being able to tie back to the history of some of these great fighters from that particular time frame. But Renty, Josh, I got to dive into him a bit more, I must admit. Melissa, as she mentioned, let's think. Hi, Dan. Melissa says, who hit harder, Jack Dempsey in the ring or the stock market crash of 1929 on his bank account? Hey, you know what? I'm going to say that stock market crash probably hit a bit harder because a lot of people suffered from that. That's one of the things that took out the great James J. Braddock and had him on welfare right there. You know, you sort of that, and then, of course, leading into the recession. So I'm going to say that, or not just recession, the Great Depression, rather. So I'm going to say that hit a bit harder than Jack Dempsey, who was a phenomenal puncher, big-time puncher in the sport, of course. The guy who racked up a number of knockouts and was known to be a knockout artist. And we have some of those great feats on film. But that stock market, it just seems to have a bit of extra power that you wouldn't be able to see here from some boxers over the course of the history of the sport. I don't know. I don't know if there's any that can match that in terms of the devastation that it can cause. But that being said, in the aftermath of such, I will say that Jack Dempsey, you know, he got into promoting. He was doing some promotional things out there in Nevada, for instance, Reno. I know he put on some shows out there, working with the guys, the likes of the great Max Baer. We're talking about guys like him. We're talking about guys like the Basque Woodchopper, Paulino Euskadun, just to name a couple there. So he was in the promotion world. So this was before, of course, Las Vegas came to be. And we know what Las Vegas means to boxing at this particular juncture. But during that period, or at least after that period, of course, Jack Dempsey was in that promotional world. And Reno, Nevada, I guess you can say, was sort of the early gauge and kind of stamp for Las Vegas coming to be what it was. Reno is also where Joe Gans and Battling Nelson fought in that magnificent contest that they fought back in, I forget the year, but it was that 42-rounder or 41, almost 42-rounder there where Joe Gans won via disqualification. So gonna go with stock market there, Melissa. Great question there. Dan says his brain was shot in the 40s, died in a mental hospital in Florida at 51. Wow, that's pretty crazy there. It's pretty crazy there, Dan. Thinking about it, Dan, Hugo Keller was never officially champion, but when Tommy Ryan stepped down, he appointed Hugo middleweight champion, and Hugo himself claimed the title. Okay, good stuff right there. Yeah, Tommy Ryan, excellent fighter there for sure. And that was something seen in a number of instances, as a matter of fact, where a fighter would step down. Joe Gans did that. As a matter of fact, Joe Gans, he had stepped down and awarded the lightweight championship, sort of, I guess, in waiting or whatever, to George Mesmick, a.k.a. Jimmy Burns. He was a protege of Tommy Burns, but George Mesmick, very decent fighter right there from that period, and Gans recognized him as champion. So I talk about that a little bit in the actual Packy McFarland video, who was another lightweight, because this was the lightweight championship right there. So there have been instances where that was the case, where a fighter has stepped down, vacated, whatever it may be, retired. When James J. Jeffries retired, as a matter of fact, he was responsible for that fight between Marvin Hart and Marvin Hart or someone, maybe Jack Root. I think it was Marvin Hart and Jack Root actually taking place. And Marvin Hart won, and I believe Tommy Burns won it from Hart, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, you get situations like that. So good point right there. So Hugo Kelly, claimant of the World Middleweight Championship. Tommy Ryan, again, hell of a fighter. Video on the channel. Check it out. For sure. Military, great history there. Dempsey was wiped out by the crash. Oh, yes, indeed. A lot of people suffered from that. And I was mentioning Braddock. I think he had a taxi company that took him out. Dempsey as well. Everybody, man, suffered something during that particular period. It just was unfortunate times for sure. Cheers to Alexander. Cheers there to you, Alex. Viva Ukraine there, Alex. As always, appreciate you dropping by there. Always sharing some good insight. And Alex says, wild, overrated. What insane asylum was that person confined to? I agree with you 100% there, Alex. I don't know. I saw it. I think it was someone on Facebook. And you just never know what you're going to see out there. You're talking to a guy with factory and those that weren't recorded. He had 800 or more fights, basically. You mean to tell me you think this guy's overrated, routinely giving up weight, even as a straw weight or whatever the lowest weight is, minimum weight? He was giving up weight as a minimum weight fighter. He would be under 100 pounds fighting guys over 100 pounds. So crazy. You think about it there, Alex, but appreciate you dropping by there. Buddy Josh Taylor says, I wouldn't say too long ago, but Michael Carbajal was such an amazing fighter. Oh, yes. Yeah, I know he's held in high regards for sure. Carbajal, I don't know a ton about him from outside of course, him being considered to be one of the great fighters, Mexican fighter right there, and held in high regard. I'm sure Mexican, right? And I know he's held in high regard. And I think about some others who are kind of around that kind of weight and things of that nature. I'm thinking about Finito Lopez. He's another one from those lower weights who was held in high regards as far as Mexican fighters there. But certainly I need to see more stuff on Carbajal in some of those kind of more newer modern eras there, that some of it I wasn't born, some of it I was very young and I didn't get to watch it there live and keep up and keep track with it. But I've gravitated towards some of the earlier years right there. But no doubt about it, I know that Michael is held in pretty high regards for sure. Josh Taylor mentioned 89 through 99. 89, 99. Okay, 10-year span there. So not bad. Not bad at all. Alexander Kimmer crash. Benny Leonard's finance. Oh, yeah, Benny Leonard. Yep, he's another one right there. One of the greatest lightweights one of the greatest lightweights the sport has seen, arguably the greatest. I mentioned before, I rate Gans 1 and then Benny Leonard 2, but it's interchangeable, realistically speaking. Benny is one of the greatest. The Ghetto Wizard holding it down there. Shout out to Benny Leonard, the Ghetto Wizards, one of the great nicknames in the sport as well. I love it. And yeah, that did hurt him. I know he ended up coming out of retirement, and of course, it wasn't the same guy. It never really is, especially when you've settled your mind on the fact that you're going to be done and you end up coming out of retirement in whatever capacity. Yeah, you never quite get that same individual who's hungry and, they're looking to gain that first world title or something of that nature. You got to think about Benny. He was on top of the world at that particular time as far as him retiring. So that his comeback was tied to the financial side specifically. That's always a challenge when you come back solely for the money. Of course, this is prize fighting. You do get paid to do it, but that can alter an individual from a mindset standpoint, how they go about training, getting their physical right. But Benny, good one right there. Alex, he did suffer from it. Melissa says there's still persistence in this day. Financing and boxing, most certainly. Hey, always looking for that prize fighting, baby. Prize fighting, that's what we call it, and it will remain prize fighting. And we've seen how it's very prevalent in Saudi Arabia right now. They seem to have taken over a lot of the prize fighting. And that's allowed for them to gain a lot of leverage. They have a lot of promoters that they're tied to, a lot of boxers that are fighting under those promotions and such. But hey, you got to give it to them. We're getting the fights that we want to see, and the fighters are getting big paydays. For some of them, bigger paydays than they otherwise would have seen to this particular point. And Turkey Alashish, he seems to be making offers that they can't refuse, and you got to give him props for that, at least. But it's very interesting because you've got a lot of power in the sport. Cheers to my man Max Durant. Hey, I haven't seen you here in the mix or in a good bit here, Max. But hey, you are appreciated there, buddy. Always great to chat with you. Says, hey, Joshua, I've discovered the great story of Billy Misk, a true fighter. Oh yeah, Billy Misk, a hell of a fighter, a guy who, despite starting at lower weights, would fight at heavyweight and all of that stuff, representing Minnesota. Is he the St. Paul Phantom? Or what is he, the St. Paul something? I think he's the St. Paul Phantom. Or is that, or am I getting mixed up with Mike Gibbons as far as the nicknames? But I know Mix for sure. He actually fought Jack Dempsey. And I believe the heavyweight title was the heavyweight title on the line? No, it might not have been. I can't remember if it was on the line. I'm pretty sure he fought Dempsey, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, that being said, I know, Mix was a hell of a fighter. He fought Fred Fulton, gave Fred Fulton all types of trouble. And additionally, he was just in with some of the greats that the sport has seen. He's definitely one of the greats that the sport has seen. The St. Paul, I know he's from Minnesota. Minnesota, they low-key have some very good fighters. I believe he's from where is he? Or is he from Minneapolis? Either Minneapolis or St. Paul. But that being said, Billy Misk, hell of a fighter right there. And he had Bright's disease, so his career kind of ended early as a result of such. But he made the best of it in terms of getting some of these top-level, high-profile fights in the midst of his career. And that took him a long way in as far as ensuring that his family was secured because of that disease. It was sort of a known thing that he would ultimately perish from such. And I know it wasn't at a old age. I believe he was in his 30s. Might have been early to mid 30s or something like that. I have to double back on it. But Billy Misk, one hell of a fighter right there, known for his toughness, and he could box in there for sure. He could certainly box in there and take it too early. Bright's disease, just think about that. So just imagine how great he could have been, even despite, dealing with such. And who knows, I don't know the particulars of Bright's disease as a whole. I think it had something to do with the immune system. So just think about that. It could have been affected him forever. And he was able to work his way through that, establish himself as one of the greatest fighters in the history of the sport. And the rest is history. We're talking about him here today, some 100 plus years later. Dan says the state hospital in Chattahoochee, Florida, used to call the mental hospital state hospital even when we were young. Alexander, okay. Good stuff there. Dan, you're in Florida? That's where you're at, Dan? Melissa said, I read that he was able to bounce back due to being an entrepreneur. Oh, yeah, Jack Dempsey there. I'm sure you're referencing Melissa. Yes, he was able to bounce back, no doubt about it. Dempsey, smart guy right there. He had his business affairs in order for the most part, and he was one of the big money generators outside of John L. Sullivan there, who became the first boxing superstar and generated over $1 million in the sport during his career as far as purses, which was unheard of at the time, considering, you're talking starting in the 1870s up to the early 1890s. But that being said, Jack Dempsey was a man about money. I have a video on the channel that really speaks on that first $1 million gate fight that he had with Carpentier, and that was 1921. But just think about that. John L. Sullivan made over $1 million in the sport during his career, which was amazing. And if you look at the conversion calculations from an inflation standpoint, it's a lot more than what meets the eye. But just think about that. And then Jack Dempsey being the first man to get $1 million gate in a single fight, and that was that fight between he and Carpentier. So that goes to show you the type of buying power that Jack Dempsey had, and just so happened to coincide with film being more prevalent in the sport. You could sell the rights. You can get some of the video rights proceedings. Radio at the time was what took it over to the top for Dempsey as well. When he fought Carpentier, that was the first time it was broadcast over radio waves. And I've shared it before, and it's mentioned in a video I have on the channel. I think it's called Jack Dempsey, How to Make $1 Million. But basically, the company RCA took a gamble that changed their trajectory in history. We know RCA is still around today, not as big as they were back in the day. With that being said, we know of RCA. They are still around, no question about it. But they took a gamble on Dempsey, and all of those that didn't take that gamble wish they would have. Craziness. Dan mentioned Jess Melissa and Godfather Marco Leon, the meeting with Solozzo, Jack Dempsey restaurant in New York. Oh, yeah, I did have that. And then last minute changes places. Good stuff there, Dan. Sharing that knowledge right there, Dan. Paul Bright says Dempsey had a restaurant in New York in the 1950s. Yes, indeed, there, Paul. Yes, indeed. That's another thing that factors out there is a standout aspect of it. Alex mentions when was shipping out to Vietnam. When he was shipping out to Vietnam, we visited Dempsey's restaurant. He took the time to say hello, shake a free soldier's hand, which as well didn't get his autograph though. Oh, that's awesome right there. So you met him. That's pretty damn awesome, Alex. Look at there. You're always sharing some good stuff, good knowledge right there, and just a good experience right there, good exclusive experience there, Alex. That is pretty amazing. Just thinking about that. Thinking about it heading to Nam. But yeah, Jack Dempsey, man, yeah, he I know he died at an older age, than most see, of course. Him and Gene Tinney both, as a matter of fact. But that being said, I remember reading or hearing, maybe a combination of both, that he had not many people attended his funeral, but of course he was a star back in the 20s. Mainly in terms of when he hit his peak, and they're heading into the 30s and such, or as we moved into the 30s. Let's think about that. I mean, when you think about the biggest stars in the history of the sport, and that's taking into account everyone from Mike Tyson to Lennox Lewis to Sugar Ray Leonard and all that stuff. The biggest stars in the history of the sport, Dempsey may very well be number one. He may very well be numero uno. So that's the type of level. Sullivan was one, him and Nonpareil Jack Dempsey, but at very much different times. But when video came into the fold, you could argue Dempsey was number one. And, there are some parallels there with the great Babe Ruth, who we talk about all the time. But Dempsey was a bigger star than Babe Ruth at one point. So just think about just the magnitude of that fighter and what he meant to the sport in itself. So that really sheds light and highlights some things right there. Mike Tyson is one of them as well. And Mike Tyson kind of mirrored himself. He was a big fan of Jack Dempsey. And that goes to show you, hey, it's kind of crazy that, Dempsey, man, like he transcended generations there. It's crazy. Paul Bright, you beat me to the punch, Dan. Oh, yes, indeed there. Indeed there. Good stuff. Dan mentioned, that's something, Alexander. Yes, indeed. Karam Salava. Hey, appreciate you there, Melissa. Yeah. Viva Ukraine, as I always say. Go check out the video on one of the greatest Ukrainian fighters we have on the channel, arguably the greatest Ukrainian fighter, Kid Kaplan. It's on the channel. Doesn't have a ton of views. It should have more. You have to understand how great Kid Kaplan was. Featherweight champion in the time of the one belt era. So he was a featherweight champion. Eventually moved up to lightweight, but he has some great names there on the resume. I think you'll enjoy it, and you'll see why he's rated in the way that he is rated as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, Ukrainian fighters ever. And that's taking into account the Klitschko's, Lomachenko, etc. Kid Kaplan. Go check out the video on the channel. Just search Kid Kaplan. There's not a lot of stuff out there on him, but a great fighter, no doubt. Dan mentions at least a couple of occasions Dipsy beat up multiple hoods at once in his elder years. I heard about that or read about that for sure. Very rare. Many great fighters died that way. Oh, yes. Yes, indeed. But yeah, I read about that there, Dan, for sure. Yes, I think, but he forgot Dipsy a couple of times. Gotcha. Alexander Campbell says Brights was basically a kidney element. Okay, got you there, Dan, or got you, Alex. Appreciate you sharing that there. So it's a kidney related disease that affects the kidney in terms of what Billy Mix died by. It was actually kidney related, you know. That's tough right there. It's tough, you know, and it took him out early. So it's crazy thing. Dan mentions probably from taking punches to the kidney. Vince Dundee, I think Bright's disease, no relation to Paul. Okay, Vince Dundee, relation to not Angelo Dundee. Who's the other Dundee? That's the brother of the other Dundee, right? There, Dan. I did a video on him, very short video. He has a ton of fights. Not Angelo because that's the trainer. But another Dundee. There's another Dundee. There's a fighter out there. I can't freaking think of his name. But he's an old school fighter who had a ton of fights. Former, I believe, welterweight champion. I believe he's a welterweight. I don't think lightweight, but welterweight. Johnny Dundee is who I'm thinking of. So Johnny Dundee, I believe Vince. There's a connection, if I'm not mistaken, between Vince Dundee and Johnny Dundee, or could I be wrong there? But good point to bring up there, Dan, for sure. Alexander Campbell, Benny Leonard died when refereeing a fight or while refereeing a fight. Oh, yeah, I recall that. Yeah, he had a heart attack there while officiating a fight. Yeah, so he had moved into the officiating realm as well there. Unfortunate, but in one sense, you could say, you know, he went out doing something he loved or wanted to do, you know, in the sport of boxing, still involved, still a name. But yeah, sucks. But yeah, that did happen. And yeah, that's the circumstances crazy, you know, thinking about being there in front of people, you're in the midst of a match and all that stuff. Insane. Age 51, Alexander. Okay, gotcha. Alphabetically. Okay. Amphetamines were big back then. A lot of fighters took them. A number of them died young of the heart. Benny Leonard one. Oh, okay. You think it was due to amphetamines? Okay. Hey, cheers to Bruce Gas, Boxing, Jazz, and more. Salute that to you, Bruce. Appreciate you dropping by, buddy. Appreciate you dropping by as always. Hey, be sure to check out Bruce Gas, Boxing, Jazz, and more, folks. Great content on the channel over there. Always doing some good things, from quizzes on the history to even sharing some of the history as well. Bruce is pretty attuned to what's going on back in those times of the 70s, 80s, 90s, etc. And hey, appreciate dropping by the channel right there, Bruce, because I always learn something when I come there and participate in the quizzes. And hey, I don't win the quizzes. Actually, there's others who actually win them. I don't think I've ever won one. This last one, I came close. I think I was second. The last one I participated in there, Bruce, I think I was second. Well, hey, it's all good questions right there, but you got to be quick on that draw. And if you're a little bit too early, press something crazy, throws you off. But appreciate you there, Bruce. So be sure to go subscribe to Bruce Gas, Boxing, Jazz, and more. Thanks for dropping by there, buddy. Chris was his brother. Okay, so Chris, Dan mentions Vince Dundee, brother, great champ too. No, not Johnny Dundee, was one of the greatest all time. Top, I'll look up Vince's brother. So Chris Dundee, as I heard what Bruce mentions there. Bruce mentions he's making up one tomorrow, a quiz tomorrow. Gonna definitely try to drop by there, Bruce. It'll be good to come check you out there. Doing another quiz, holding it down. Bruce Gas, Boxing, Jazz, and more. But that's good stuff for sure. So Vince Dundee, brother Chris Dundee. Okay, no relation to Johnny Dundee. So I have a video on the channel of Johnny Dundee, who had, as I mentioned, a crazy amount of fights. I want to say in the neighborhood of 300, maybe above 300. It's just insane. You think about just the sheer numbers as far as overall fights for individuals back during this period. But certainly worth checking out. It's a short video, as I mentioned there, but I think you'd enjoy it once you dive in the mix there and just give it a chance. I think you would enjoy the video. But that being said, yeah, it just shows you just the sheer amount of fights some of these guys would participate in. I mean, when you're getting in that 100 range, that's a lot. But to think 200, 300 plus, insane. So that was commonplace back then. And hey, today, here in modern times, we see individuals with a lot of amateur fights. So that factors in as well. We have a number of guys, especially out of Eastern Europe, who have a ton of amateur fights. There are women out there with a ton of amateur fights as well. And I think that's just kind of where we are on this particular day. So it's pretty crazy. Alexander Campbell, Johnny Dundee, was nicknamed the Scotch Wop. Yep, indeed. He and Leonard had a boatload of great fights. Oh yeah, that's just think about that. Two of the all-time greats. Any way you slice it, just two of the greatest fighters in the history of the sport, dealing it out with each other. And I had to dive into those a bit more myself there. But yeah, I knew him to be the Scotch Wop there. Oh, Johnny Dundee. So in the video that I mentioned that's on the channel, I'm only highlight things at a very high level because I think it was only like 3 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes, somewhere in that range. But it just gives you a small tidbit. And I haven't done anything specifically on Benny Leonard in terms of diving into his career, though that is something that has been on the radar and I hope to do at some point. But another great, great fighter right there. And there's also some videos on the channel that more so look into it does the photo animation, like deep fake animation of these fighters. So I think there's one of Dundee, Leonard as well. That's about it. I might have a short on Leonard as well, but yes, two amazing fighters who are some of the best that the sport has seen, bar none, bar any era, just across the board. Dan mentions exactly Alexander Johnny Dundee, Sicilian, but his manager was Scott, took the name Dundee. Okay, yeah, good stuff right there. Yeah, good stuff. The Scotch Wop, that's funny. So yeah, that is funny. So Angelo or Johnny Dundee, Sicilian, so Sicily. I wouldn't mind visiting there. I'm sure the food would be amazing. Alex says, side bit, never call a Scotch. Okay, got you right there. So you don't call them Scotch. Shout out to the Scottish boxers out there, Scott. So, of course, here representing these times, we have Josh Taylor, the Tartan Tornado, holding it down for Scotland. And he's making a move up to welterweight. I saw that here. I saw something not too long ago that he's making a move to welterweight. And he's taking on a pretty decent fighter there for his first fight in welterweight. I can't recall who it is, but I know he's making that move. So, very, very interesting right there. Dan, notice my proper dictation, Alexander. Good stuff there, Dan. Cheers there to Just Boz. Hey, Just Boz, what's going on there, Boz? Hey, I don't know how many names you got. Got Just Boz, Boz's Bass Notes, Boz's Boxing. A lot of Boz's out there, Boz. But I appreciate you dropping by there, buddy. It says Vince Dundee was originally called Vincenzo Lazzara from Sicily. Okay. Holding it down from Sicily. So that too is where Johnny Dundee is from, huh? Interesting. Okay. Then, well, Alex mentioned Scotch is whiskey. Oh yeah, have that Scotch there. I know about that Scotch. Can't tell the full differences, but yeah, I know there are some slight differences. Dan mentions Boz. Hello, Vince Dundee. Brother was a great champion. Joe Dundee. Okay, Joe Dundee. Okay, Joe Dundee is the brother of Vince Dundee. So I got to dive into those two fighters a bit more there. So Joe Dundee, and as mentioned, no relation to Johnny Dundee. Interesting. Just Boz says Bass Notes was a flop for several reasons, so I returned to Just Boz. Oh, okay, got you there, Boz. Hey, I'll send you that document. I'll send you a document that'll help you out there, Boz. It'll help you out. Just Boz mentions, I know. Hi, Dan. Well, yeah. Appreciate you there, Boz. Cheers to the final boss, TFB. Salute there to you. TFB says, big up 86. Who do you have in a fantasy fight? Dempsey versus Marciano. Love the channel, mate. Hey, likewise. They appreciate you dropping by, sharing comments, thoughts, etc. there. Final boss. Hey, it's always great to chat with you. Hey, be sure to go check him out, folks. Go subscribe to the final boss. He's got my man Jack Dempsey in there with Jess Willard handing him that pounding in his description or his avatar picture there. So be sure to go check him out there, folks. Appreciate your final boss. Hey, that's a great one right there. Jack Dempsey versus Marciano. Wow. Super amazing right there. Tough one to call. There are certain things that favor each fighter. I would say there are certain things that favor each fighter. Dan mentions Angelo Dundee as well. Oh, yeah, Angelo Dundee is great. Dan mentioned some reason I got to pick Marciano, but tough call. Yeah, it's tough call, Very, very tough call, prime for prime, man. It would be very interesting. Man, it's a good question there. Final boss. Hey, others, let me know your thoughts. Final boss says Dempsey Marciano. And I'm a big fan of Jack Dempsey. Yeah, if I had a list of my 3 to 5 greatest or favorite fighters, Dempsey is certainly one of them. And man, that's a tough one right there. I'm gonna go with. It's gonna seem crazy. I'm gonna go with my man, the Manasseh Mauler, but it's very interesting. I'm gonna go with the Manasseh Mauler in a tough and scrappy contest for sure. It's very interesting because of the fact that we know what Rocky Marciano was capable of, and the fact that he was a tough guy to deal with in there. He could battle through attrition. We've seen the case. We've seen that was the case with Dempsey as well. I think these two fighters will meet each other right there in the middle at varying points, and both of them would be landing some pretty solid big shots. Endurance, hey, it's hard to call. It would be a tough one, just either way there. I'm going with the Manasseh Mauler, but some of that could be because I just like the Manasseh Mauler and I'm a fan. I can't say that it's fully, fully thought through in a definitive enough manner to say that it's with 100% certainty. But as far as capabilities, I know he's capable of pulling such off, just as I feel that Rocky Marciano would be capable of pulling such off as well. But make no mistake about it, Jack Dempsey, he was definitely battle tested on a number of facets. I wouldn't pick Dempsey in every fight, but that being said, I just think it's an interesting one. Those are some bombs that Rocky Marciano would have to deal with as well, and I think Dempsey would certainly be able to connect, and therefore I think that carries him to a victory, probably via point. Let's say this is a 10-rounder. If it goes longer than that, I still lean on the side of Dempsey, because I think he's game for it. Yeah, I think he's game for it. So very interesting right there. But hey, it could go the other way as well. Rocky could go in there and just start to lay into him. Dempsey can get gun shy and, The game changes just like that. But hard to say for sure. But I'm going with the Manasseh Mauler there. Kid Blackie, Jack Dempsey, Manasseh, Colorado, baby. Dan, some reason I got to pick Marciano, but tough call. Yep, indeed. Just By says, back then it was easier to break through in boxing if you were Irish. So many Italians changed their names into Irish ones. Oh, yeah, I can see that. Yeah, deep history, a deep Irish history in boxing. I know we did a live stream talking about some of the great Irish boxers pre-1900 recently, and I thought it was a good one. Get to chat about some of these great boxers. But yeah, I know you had that. Just a lot of name changes in general. That's kind of the nature of the beast back then. Just By as mentioned, we already talked about it. Oh yes, certainly. Even though Dundee is a Scottish name. Oh yes, indeed. Alexander Campbell says Dempsey KO Marciano's style was tailor made for Dempsey. Hey, cheers there, Alex. Hey, I see what you're saying there for sure. I see what you're saying. I'd lean towards Dempsey as well. As I mentioned there, I think that Dempsey could get to him. Dempsey could hit him for sure. Not that he couldn't hit Dempsey, but Dempsey would come in with that sort of what do you call it, the crouching style that he do the Dempsey roll, all that good stuff. So he had a little bit of defense to his game, despite him being largely considered an offensive fighter. But yeah, it'll be very interesting. Alex, thanks for sharing there. Dan mentions Marciano, very gracious, said he couldn't call it, said Dempsey had power to KO me, meaning Marciano. Yeah, good stuff there. Yeah, I think Dempsey certainly had the power to do so. And we have to think about it. Dempsey in the 20s was very much a part-time fighter, especially there towards the middle and back end. But realistically speaking, yeah, he was just I guess when you think about it, he was a part-time fighter throughout the 20s. So many gaps there as far as time in between fights, talking years. And that had an effect on things. So we probably could have seen even more of Dempsey at his greatest had he been more active during that particular period. But a war, as Dan mentions, indeed, it would certainly be a war. The final boss mentions both tough as hells, both get hit, but I'm going with Marciano due to his stamina and power. But Dempsey was a very quick starter, and Rocky was a slow starter too. I can definitely see how you have Dempsey. Good stuff there. The final boss. That's a legitimate argument there as well. You can make a case for that. Dempsey, he had trouble with Tunney after some period of time off and all that stuff, but he found himself largely just kind of following Tunney around the ring, getting outboxed. I don't think that would be the case with Marciano, so that makes it interesting to think about it from that perspective. So, good point there, the final boss. Thanks for sharing. Dubai says, I don't know, really hard to say who wins. I think Dempsey was a little heavier. Yes, indeed. Dempsey would be a little bit heavier than him. He would have a little bit of height on him as well, with Marciano being around 5'10", Dempsey being around 6'1". So he'd have that in his favor. So that's a nod on the favor of Dempsey's side. And I'm sure Dempsey had the reach advantage as well, because I know Rocky didn't have a super long reach. I believe it was like in the 60, 68 inches or maybe somewhere around there. So, you'd have the reach on the side of Dempsey as well. So that's kind of stuff factors in. But very interesting fight. Very interesting fight for sure. That could swing in his favor there, says By. Dan says, I got to say Marciano if I had to. Feel you there for sure. Alex says Dempsey had one-punch KO power. No doubt about it. Rocky was tough. That's why I wanted to give him a nod from a decision standpoint. Of course, we know he was never knocked down, and kind of busted up at times. But that being said, as tough as they come as a fighter as well, especially relative to the size. But yeah, Dempsey had that real legitimate KO power. Rocky Marciano, while he can knock you out and all that stuff, you could argue some of it came due to the attrition because he had great stamina. But that being said, he could get it done early there as well. But as far as punchers are concerned, certainly Dempsey gets the nod in the puncher category. True puncher there for sure. And Just By mentions Rocky had one hell of a right. No doubt about it. So did Marciano, as Dan mentioned. Yeah. That's what you said. Cheers there to my mom. Says evening time, proud mom watching. Hey, appreciate you dropping by, showing some love. Thanks for checking me out here. Always great to have you in the mix. Dan says only one didn't change his name, Canzoneri. Oh yeah, Tony Canzoneri, one of the greats for sure. Another one with a ton of fights. I have a book by Mark Allen Baker. On Tony Canzoneri. It's in this backpack I have over here on the floor, as a matter of fact. Tony Canzoneri, one of the great fighters the sport has seen for sure. One of the great champions. Great early on as well, even as a teenager. Just think about that. So that goes to show you, when you think about some of these fighters and them being great even in their teenage years, then that adds a bit of icing on the cake in terms of their history and just kind of where they stand out in the sport. Just by Willie Pep just shortened his name. Oh, Willie Pep. Shout out to Willie Pep. I have a Willie Pep. Do I have the book? No, I don't think I have a book. But Connecticut representing right there. Shout out to Mark Allen Baker, who I mentioned. He's holding it down from Connecticut. Mark Allen Baker. Matter of fact, same spot as Willie Pep there. So be sure to go sign up, 86boxing.com. to win this actual book right there, autographed by the great Mark Allen Baker on Jack Dillon. But that's in relation to Willie Pep, one of the greatest fighters of all time, regardless of weight right there. And you could argue the greatest defensive fighter of all time, but just one of the true greats in general. I still need to see that movie, The Featherweight. I haven't seen it. I know that it went to some of the film festivals and all that stuff, and there were like some limited releases. I haven't looked it up in a little while now, but I want to look back on it to see what the deal is, because that's one I certainly want to see for sure. But good one stuff. Or Papa Leo was his real name. Okay, got you there, Boz. The final boss says it would be one of the best fights ever, up there with the Ali Tyson Foreman listing for me. Most certainly, Marciano Dempsey, and that's something to dream of right there. Actually, a fight to dream of. So it would rank there amongst those great fights for sure. There, the final boss. There's no question about it. You know, I'd love to see it myself. You know, we can do these little simulations via games and all that stuff. But that doesn't really put it in perspective. You know, you can't really factor in that will. Just think about that Dempsey that was, you know, looking to get that edge, hopping from train to train, all of that stuff, just looking for that break, going up against the iron-willed Rocky Marciano. I mean, something amazing would have most certainly happened there. Dempsey 180 says, Dan. Just by that, I don't think so, Dan. Rocky weighed around 180. It could be somewhere in that range. Marciano 187. So yeah, it could vary. It could vary between the both of them for sure. You shouldn't mix them. Sure, you didn't mix them up. It was good stuff. Alexander Campbell mentions for Tony Dempsey weigh in at 197, Willard 187, Fairpool 192. Yeah, that seems about the range he was in when he was at his best right there, peaking. And I think, hey, that was one hell of a Dempsey right there. Very formidable Dempsey. Think about that, 187 against Willard, who was about 240 in that particular fight. And 6'6", 240, 187-pound Dempsey gave him that work right there. You can just see him laying into him. But that iron will, that version of Dempsey, and that's the Dempsey that certainly always comes to mind for me, which makes it hard for me to pick anyone over that version of Dempsey under any circumstances. It's just that hell of a performance from such a great heavyweight right there. One of my favorites as mentioned. Just by says here Dempsey was 185 or so. Yeah, he would be over that for sure. For sure there, Boz. I think that's right. Probably if we said peak Dempsey, you could say 190. If we want to give them a peak weight, let's just say we could say 190 Dempsey, and we could say 180 Marciano, or even 185, but certainly 190 Dempsey. I'll say 180 Marciano, and let him go at it. Something special. Pep was a referee too, by the way. Refereed some big fights. Oh, awesome. Yeah, I don't really know his refereeing history, but that's pretty good. That's pretty dope. I've seen some Pep interviews. Just seemed like a great individual, just a great guy in general to share stories with And shout out to Joe Casano, referee Joe Casano, holding it down out of representing Connecticut as well. And he is someone who, helped, get me the info that got me into the officiating space. But he's a friend of Willie Pep's and had many conversations with Willie Pep. Spoke about how great of a guy that Willie Pep was. And used to have a restaurant. I think it was a pizza spot there as well. I believe New Haven, Connecticut. New Haven, or New Haven or Hartford, one of the two, but I think it's New Haven. But shout out to Joe Casano out there. Appreciate you. Introduced me to Mark Allen Baker, as a matter of fact. So appreciate Joe Casano. Sir Lucifer Vampiro. Hey, appreciate you, Sir Lucifer. Says, my instinct says Marciano over Dempsey. Fighters who come at him have no chance, and I suspect he has more stamina and a better chin than Dempsey, but not by much, I don't think. Got you there. Hey, compelling point there, Sir Lucifer. Appreciate you dropping by there, buddy. That's something you can factor in because Dempsey would certainly be coming at him, and you could argue that could play into Marciano's favor in some sense right there. So we'd have those opportunities to tee off. That's what makes it very, very interesting for sure. But appreciate you, Sir Lucifer. Dan says Dempsey said they always build him 190, but he said he's never more than 180. His fighting manuals, he's really big on staying light as possible. Speed is power and power is speed. Got you there, Dan. Got you. I'm sure there's something that there are some things that factor into that for sure. The same about Rocky Marciano, right? In terms of he boiled himself down in weight. So he was a supreme lean fighting machine when he stepped in that ring. So despite giving up some weight, he was very much conditioned, ready to take the punishment and dish it out. You could argue the same for Dempsey there. Dempsey knew the game. He knew the game like he was reffing it. The final boss says Marciano was usually 184, 187. Okay, gotcha right there. So yeah, they would match up fairly well. So they're not too far off weight-wise. Just think about peak primed weight. Not too far off right there. So you might get a little slighter edge to Dempsey on the weight side. But that being said, not too far off overall. So that makes it pretty compelling as well. Dan mentions that when older, after 3 years of no fights before 20, could have been a few pounds more. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that inactivity, that certainly, I'd imagine, would have added to some of the weight there, and it certainly didn't help Dempsey. I think, it would have been amazing to see if, or had he and Tunney fought some years prior. Of course, it couldn't have happened in that same manner, but that being said, just thinking about it from the perspective of we had a fairly inactive Dempsey who wasn't necessarily focused on boxing to that degree at that particular time, had a ton of outside interest. His wife was a Hollywood darling, so you can expect and understand why, there were so many distractions out there. Dan says, sold better to build heavier. Oh, yeah. Yeah, certainly. You think about some of the so-called giants we've seen build in certain sports. Wrestling was big on that, and we've seen some of that in boxing as well. I have a video on the channel of Gogia Mitu, who was this Romanian fighter who was about 7'4". He didn't really have a ton of fights, but that being said, there were some who built him as over 8 feet tall, which is pretty crazy. The final boss says, I do think Dempsey may have been more devastating in his prime. The one that beat up Leonard would be hard to beat. Completely agree, Josh, there. Cheers to your final boss for sure. Yeah, I think that would have been a tough one right there. That version of Dempsey, that is the most compelling version. That is the version that made me a fan of Dempsey, and that is the version that kind of stands out amongst all of his feats, though there's some great footage out there otherwise. But it's amazing to have that. Just think about having that on footage. Reading it would be one thing, but to see it on footage as well just adds an extra bit of emphasis right there. You see him doing what he was doing to the fighter he was doing it to, just thinking about the size and all of that stuff. I was mentioning Jack Dillon, another giant slaying type performer or performance in that particular contest right there. So good stuff there, Final Boss. Just by says, I think your dog is bored. I think she wants to leave out of here. She just hopped up. I'm gonna let her go here soon. Final Boss says people may disagree, but after seeing Cabal beating everyone with body shots, freaking the heavyweight there. It makes me think Rocky would do better than people think at heavyweight today. He would also weigh 10 to 20 pounds more. Yeah, I think that would be the case there. You're talking about freaking damn it, was it? Cabal. It's damn it, what is dude's name? I know you're talking about, but yeah, he just took out Big Bang Jang right there. That German. So yeah, or at least fighting out of Germany. But yeah, I think that is the case. You know, you have to factor in the times, different types of situations, different gloves, all of that stuff there. All of that stuff factors in. But yeah, bigger doesn't necessarily mean better. There's footage on the channel, right? On this channel, 86Boxing, where I just put together the longer version. I can't remember if it's color or not, where you see Kid Norfolk taking Big Bill Tate. Norfolk, about 5'9", 5'10", maybe, if that. Big Bill Tate being 6'6". Norfolk known to be a light heavyweight, generally, if you were to associate him with any weight. Big Bill Tate, a heavyweight, sparring partner of the likes of Jack Dempsey, among others. And you see Norfolk practically leaping up there, just giving him that work. All Big Bill Tate could do really is just grab, tie him up for the most part. So that just shows you the different dynamics that are tied to it. But that being said, I got to look up the damn heavyweight there you mentioned there. It's damn it, what is his name? Freaking yeah, but he chopped down Big Bang Jane. That body work, the body work factors in, and he's great at it. Just chopping, just digging in on there. Philip, I got to look him up so I can get his name right. Big Bang Jane. But yeah, who is he? Because he just chopped him down right there. I actually picked Jane going into that fight. Oh yeah, Caballero. Oh yeah, Ajit Caballero. So yeah, I just picked. Yeah, I had picked Big Bang Jang. I like Big Bang Jang. I have a Big Bang Jang video on the channel. Ajit Caballero, man, hell of a body shot guy, and he was giving them that work right there for sure. So I agree with your Final Boss. Dan says Kent Norton 6'3" and built like a monster. Always 203 when entering the ring. YouTube Johnny Carson show. Ali and Norton do a weigh-in. Google watch really good. Okay, I checked it out there, Dan. But yeah, the Black Hercules there, Ken Norton. But yeah, he's a solidly built guy right there. And then Adonis, as they say. Just by said, only guy they didn't have to build higher back then was Primo Carnera. Oh yeah, he was legitimately a big dude, just in general, big fist, everything. He was just a solid freaking guy. Another Italian out there putting that work in. The Italian heavyweight of today that is to watch is Guido Vianelli, actually, and he's going to be fighting Richard Torres, the American heavyweight with a lot of promise. Decorated amateur. So Guido Vianelli, Richard Torres, that's going to be a good one that is coming up. So where do you check it out? Morning Wombat, cheers out to you. Morning Wombat says, was Harry Graves' 45-fight win streak in 1919 the greatest rampage in boxing history? Graves has a great resume for the time. Yeah, I rate Graves' resume at number one there, just overall between him and Langford, as far as I'm concerned. As it relates to resume, see my dog trying to get out of here. Hey, I'm gonna let you out here shortly. But yeah, that's got to be one of the greatest tears in history. Realistically, it moved into 1920, so he actually went 52-0. So think about that, an additional 7 fights before he actually had a draw. It wasn't a loss, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think it was a loss. It was a draw, but could have been a loss though. But I know it was 52-0. I'm just trying to remember if it was actually a loss or a draw. I could be mistaken on that. But 52-0 realistically, but 45-0 in the year 1919. One of the greatest feats in the history of the sport, arguably the greatest. When I rank there among it is Henry Armstrong winning 3 titles in 3 different weight classes, holding them at the same time. That right there is pretty amazing as well. But that 45-0 in a single year, especially looking at the competition that Grab went up against, truly amazing. There's a video on the channel that specifically dives into that. Check it out. Appreciate your morning wombat. Thanks for dropping by there, buddy. Dan says Cornera not a speck of fat either, but not a great champion. No, not the greatest for sure. I watched not too long ago him and Max Baer going at it. I watched a replay of that fight. A lot of fumbling and bumbling going on. Pretty crazy there. But Canary, yeah, not the greatest, but certainly not the worst. You know, though some might say he's the worst, but he's not the worst. He is not the worst. The final boss says, sorry, my spelling is terrible. So, hey, I got you right there. Especially when you factor in auto spell. Yeah, it happens. Hey, no shade here. Final boss, you good, buddy? Just by no, but what a specimen. Yes. The morning one bat 86 has a show. Grab was really 49-0. Oh yeah, 52 straight wins, no defeats. Think about that. And we have some careers that are well less than that. The final boss, Marciano versus Vingo, is a fight I wish we had on video. Was supposed to be a war, and Vingo was a big boy, 6'4". There's a myth that Rocky never beat a big, good heavyweight. Gotcha there. Gotcha. Yeah, it'll be cool to have that type of stuff on video. I think that would shed light on a number of things because a lot of boxers get discredited because of the fact that there's no video footage. But, hey, the accounts themselves are there. They're most certainly there. So we can certainly appreciate the video footage we do have and appreciate it even more thinking about what we don't have. But that being said, doesn't take away from the feats themselves and who these individuals were in with. Bingo nearly died there, says Just Boz. Gotcha. Dan says Boz, Canero's first heavyweight champion to become world wrestling champion. Remember on Bruce? Oh, interesting. World wrestling champion. Back in the older days, I guess you could say. Not necessarily early days because wrestling was around. Professional wrestling, that is. But that's very interesting. Didn't know that. I do know that Classy Freddie Blassie had a boxing matchup with someone. Can't remember who, but he did have a boxing match I saw. Well, not footage, but I saw that is the case. It's like recorded in terms of how it's reported as an official fight. But the final boss says also Dempsey versus Fulton would be interesting to have on video, although it would have been a short fight. I know it would have been amazing to have on video. We have a very good picture of Fulton being floored, but man, to imagine having that on video, that would be something special right there. I would love to have some Fulton video. There's a Fulton video on the channel, folks. If you're hearing the name Fred Fulton, you don't know the Minnesota plasterer, the Rochester plasterer, be sure to go check out that video on the channel, Fred Fulton. Just search Fred Fulton. It should pop up as well. There are a few videos out there, but this one dives into a lot of things there. But Fred Fulton, 6'5", 200-plus, Minnesota, big-time puncher right there. Dipsy was able to take him out in a round. Amazing. Oh, thanks for the info, Dan. Just there, Alex said the Tunney fight was his highest weight at 197. Okay, gotcha. Also, Jack had suffered a bout of blood poisoning in the days before antibiotics. The mental stress caused by Kearns' lawsuit lost lightning reflex. Oh, yeah, I can see that. Yeah, he and Kearns had parted ways at that particular point. And some of that had to do with the fact that Dempsey was no longer as active as he was. And yeah, I think that kind of factors in for sure as far as what may have been some of the things that affected Dempsey coming into that contest. So most certainly not the best of Dempsey that we saw there, No shade to Tunney, but hey, you got to give Tunney props. He did win at least 19 of the 20 rounds the two fought together. So that's saying something. Paulino Uskadun was 5'10", but weighed above 200 often. Oh, yeah. Big, thick guy right there. Oh, Paulino. I like Paulino. True warrior, fighter, true contender right there. I never got that title or title shot. But that being said, real legitimate, true contender right there. Could blend in and mix it in any era. He just was that type of guy, a true fighter right there. The Spaniard. So salute to Paulino Uskadun. I've been meaning to do a video on him, and I've thought about it and said I was going to do it for a long period of time. Haven't gotten to it yet. But, man, do not sleep on Paulino. Maybe something there in the works here at some point. Bass guys are strong. Check out Jose Manuel Urtain. Okay, I had to check him out there, Bod. Be sure to send me that again. Jose Manuel Urtain. Okay, I'm going to try and check him out for sure. I know you're coming with it, Boz. Vingo's a monster, huge, undefeated, favorite to win. Rocky almost killed him. Yeah, that's insane. That's insane. Hey, the bigger they are, the harder they fall, as they say, Sullivan said. Alexander Campbell says Canero was a creation of the mob. Certainly, yeah, he was used and abused, I guess you can say. From that standpoint, thinking about the outside stuff, most certainly used and abused. Unfortunate. But yeah, that is the case there for sure. Shout out to Just Bod said, yes, he did, Dan. And then the final boss says, seeing how old Rusty Dempsey nearly beat Tunney with the controversial 10 count, it makes me think a younger Dempsey would have knocked Tunney out, although Tunney was a fantastic fighter. Yeah, it's a very interesting one there, final boss. I could see that. I could see Dempsey knocking him out there for sure. One of the things I've always said as well is that I think that Tunney, he seemed to be in his senses when he got up from the long count. That being said, it was a long count, but he did seem to be in his senses. So, I mean, that's got to count for something right there. He was certainly in his senses, but I do think that a different version of Dempsey, say that 1919 version of Dempsey, could have knocked Gene Tunney out. And there's no slight, no disrespect to Gene Tunney right there. So salute to him there for sure. Hey, shout out to my man, Dan the man sent a super sticker, $50. Holy crap. I think that's the biggest super sticker ever received, or super chat. So salute there to you, Dan the man. I got to get a big shout out to my man, Dan there. Hey, appreciate you there. Dan, yeah, hey, you are appreciated for sure there, Dan. Like, wow, I can't even express it in true terms right there. Wow, wasn't expecting such right there from that perspective. Well, wow, very generous, as you mentioned there, Boz. Very generous there. Hey, appreciate you, Dan, the freaking man right there. Hey, be sure to go check out Dan, folks. As I mentioned, Dan has been here for a good long period. Always provided great insight into what is going on in the world of boxing history and sharing great insight on the channel there, Dan. You could say I owe you one there, Dan, but no, I wholeheartedly appreciate it there, buddy. So thank you for sure there. Man, Dan the freaking man right there. Dan the man. Yeah, we're gonna get back to that for sure there, Dan. So that's good stuff right there. Shout out to Adam Hurley. Appreciate you, Adam. I've caught Brian Norman Jr. on live about 20 times. Okay. Salute that to you, Alan. Thanks for dropping by there, buddy. Yeah, Brian Norman Jr. Yeah, hey, he's good. I gotta give it to him. He's good. I actually thought Santillon would give him trouble, Giovanni Santillon, but man, he basically handled and you could say destroyed Santillon. So Brian Norman Jr. is the real deal for sure. But that's good stuff right there, Adam. Thanks for dropping by, buddy. Utrain lifted Ali above his head. Oh wow. Urtain lifted him above his head. Oh wow, right there. But that's interesting. Josh, your Fred Fulton video is up there with your best work. Oh, appreciate it there, the final boss. Appreciate you there, buddy. I was excited about it, and I had seen his name float around. Random Acoustic Thoughts. Shout out to Random Acoustic Thoughts. Be sure to go check him out. Looks like a mosquito. But he used to talk about Fred, or his name would pop up in some of Random's videos and all of that stuff. And I just kind of knew of him, but I was like, you know what? Let me dive into him a bit more right there. But man, Fulton, legit beast right there for sure. So I'm super. I was super stoked about. That's one of my favorite videos that I've done right there, especially when it sheds light on those guys who aren't necessarily the biggest names. They had a name and they were there at that pinnacle, and he is one of those. And I do think that Fred Fulton would have defeated Jess Willard, so that would have been his best opportunity at getting that shot at the world heavyweight title. Crazy how history changes, and I think he would have changed history and the trajectory of such, because I think that he would have beaten Jess Willard had Jess Willard given him the opportunity to fight for the world heavyweight title, and that was supposed to happen, but it ended up being Willard versus Frank Moran in a fight that ended up being a draw, where some argued that Frank Moran deserved the win. So it's crazy just when you think about it right there. But Dan the man right there, very generous man, brother. Yeah, brother Josh. Hey, appreciate you there, Dan. So, brother Josh, as always, appreciate you today. Fair play. Yeah, good stuff. He's amazing. All right, check it there. Bye, Josh. What is your next longer video you're working on right now? Hey, that's a good question there, Final Boss. Man, I have a couple of them that I've been working on, or a few of them. So I would say that the next longest one, I need to dive back into it probably sooner than later. And I would say I'm about 80% through is one covering Jack Dempsey versus Tommy Gibbons, the Montana fight, sort of a deep dive into that fight. So that's one that is being worked right now as we speak. And I would say that I'm about 80% through. So that goes to show I just have this small little piece that I still need to finish. Well, 80% through with the actual script. Let me rephrase the script right there, since I've been going through the script. I dive into these different newspapers, etc. I go through the script writing process. I had started a little while back, took a break from it because I did the Sam Langford and Marciano videos in between writing that. But there's so much information out there on that fight that just when I thought, okay, I'm getting ready to getting close to wrapping this thing up, something else would pop up. So therefore, I haven't finished it yet, but I would say I'm about 80% through the actual script. And I think the editing will be fairly straightforward for the most part, because a lot of the focus is going to be on the things outside of the ring in itself. Not necessarily the fight. We have footage of the fight, so we know how the fight went down. So a lot of the video focus will be on just all of the particulars, the crazy numbers surrounding this fight, because you have to think about it. This was Dempsey post Carpentier, and that Carpentier fight was $1 million gate fight. And purse wise, in that fight with Carpentier, I believe it was around. He had a solid guarantee, but with those radio proceeds with RCA and all that stuff, I know it was over 300 and something, maybe 400 and something thousand. So it was a crazy amount. It's in the video right there, so that's what factors in as it relates to such. But yeah, that's one I'm working right there. So I would say that's probably the one that would come next, since I'm about there. But that's not the only one that I have worked or something that I have been in the works. Maybe after that, I would say that I'm about 50% through, and I haven't touched it in a long while. The rivalry between Jack Britton and Ted Kid Lewis. Now, that one will be an amazing one right there. So I'd say I'm about 50% through that one. So still a good bit to go, and I haven't touched it in a while. Now, the thing about it is, I've been able to find more information on Jack Britton than I have Ted Kid or Ted Kid Lewis than I have Jack Britton, who is the American in this, which is where I'm at. But of course, Ted Kid Lewis, I feel like he was well documented, a lot more documented than Jack Britton. Of course, we know Britton, another one of those guys, 300 plus fights, amazing fighters, one of the greatest, if not the greatest welterweight in the history of the sport. But no footage, of course, and not a ton of not a ton of like personal background information. That's what I've been struggling to find, Britain, I would say, from an overall perspective. That's the part I haven't been able to find as much. But good stuff there. The final boss. Dan says Mike Tyson said if not a long count, this was a killer. Having Tunney hurt, Tyson thought he'd have KO'd him. Yeah, I do think, hey, that could have factored in for sure. Tunney seemed to be in his senses, but if it would have been more immediate, not with that delay, you could argue that Dempsey would have jumped right back in and gave him that work. Now, Tunney did run. You could say he kind of ran away. Some would say he ducked and dodged or got away, but he kind of ran, and therefore the fight ended. Those animations of the fighters' pictures look amazing. Oh, thanks there, Boz. Yeah, going to have more of those to come into the fold for sure in some of the videos. No doubt about it there, buddy. Dan says Dempsey was gracious, said he thought Tunney was fine because Dempsey so later that he believed G. Okay. Yeah, I know they became pretty good friends after that as well. The final boss, no disrespect intended, but Willard was one of the worst heavyweight champions ever. One defense in 4 years, and that was a draw with Frank Moran. Him and Corbett have to be the two. So, yeah, I think Willard is one of the worst. If I had a top 5 worst heavyweight champions of all time, Willard would be there in the mix there somewhere. I'd have him there, probably Marvin Hart there in the mix as well. I have to think about some of the others, but Willard most certainly there, the final boss. You are not alone in that thinking. But, yeah, only a draw to boot, a draw that he potentially lost, and then, of course, absolute destruction at the hands of Jack Dempsey. Tyson claimed Buster Douglas got a long count, but I don't think he did. Oh, yeah, I remember seeing that right there, Boz. Yeah, it's arguable, but certainly I don't know if it fully changed the outcome. Tyson, hey, he could have been better prepared coming into that. The final boss. Can't wait for that one, buddy. Oh, yes, indeed. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to jump back in the mix. Motivated for sure there. Dan says he said because Gene told him he was fine. He said Gene wouldn't lie to him. Dempsey, rough, young, very gracious. Oh, yeah, that's good stuff. Yeah, Gene, genuine guy right there. Genuine guy for sure. So I think you make a great point there, Dan. Making the past come alive, bro. Yes, indeed. It's always good. Bye. It's true, not long count, but the Japanese guy at ringside did hold up his finger at ringside, starting at finger 4. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, pretty crazy right there. Dan the man, $50 super sticker. Big shout out there to you, Dan, once again there, buddy. Hey, appreciate you for sure. Man, showing some love right there. True love there in the mix. Hey, always appreciate you, Dan. I had to show it. Much love there to you, Dan the freaking man. Alexander Campbell says Luther McCarthy, if he hadn't died young, would have beaten Willard or Fulton. Oh, yeah. He was a cowboy that unknowingly broke his neck, breaking a Bronco. In his last fight, his opponent landed a light jab, killed him. Yeah, freaking Arthur Pelkey is the one who did that. Yeah, Luther McCarthy. You know, I wouldn't mind doing a video on him because, I know he was very promising. Yeah, that's crazy. Died as a result of his fight. But yeah, Arthur Pelkey. I just know Arthur Pelkey mainly because of that fight, even though he was in with some other decent guys. But McCarthy was promising. You're talking about during the era of the Great White Hopes, and Fulton, you could argue, was one of those, but not necessarily because his career started while Johnson was a little bit late in his. But certainly McCarthy is one of those big, solid young guy who would have been very promising there, Alex. Great name to bring up for sure. Just Boz, holy shit, didn't know that. Yes, indeed. It's unfortunate. Yeah, it's unfortunate. Dan heard it too. Apparently he was dominant. Yes, indeed. Yeah, he was held in very high regard. Some viewed him as a legitimate threat there. A guy who could dethrone Jack Johnson, and who knows where or how far he could have gone. Man, sometimes just like circumstances, certain situations just kind of upend things, and it's unfortunate right there. You have such promise in Then a very unfortunate situation comes about, likely unexpected, and changes the course of history just like that. So that did affect him from an overall standpoint, and ultimately we didn't get to see the true breadth of how far McCarthy could have gone. But very, very promising. You look at some of the articles and things that are written about him from that time, they pretty much lend to such. The final ball says Tyson versus Frazier is always one that interested me too, as well as Joe Louis versus Jack Dempsey and Foreman versus Lennox Lewis. Jack Sharkey, who fought both, favored Dempsey over Joe, which surprised me. Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. Certainly, Joe Louis, he could be susceptible there in the early portions of contests, or when he wasn't necessarily focused and started a bit slow. But man, we know he had an erasure of his own right there. It'll be a hell of a fight for sure. In thinking about Dempsey versus Lewis, hell of a fight right there. The final boss coming with some heavy hitters right there. Hell of a fight. I like both of them though. I do like both of them. I do rate Joe Louis as my number 2 heavyweight behind Ali, but I do feel that there are interchangeable aspects to them. But that would have been a damn good one. Foreman and Lewis, another damn good one right there. You could see some strengths that lean in the favor of both in terms of that particular contest. Hey, both of them, man, big punchers. That tough chin of Foreman. You probably lean Foreman in relation to his chin. With that being said, Lewis was technically savvy enough to potentially outpoint him as well. Then Tyson Frazier would have been a very interesting one. That would have been a very interesting one, I guess, just for the fact that two guys who could hook with the best of them. They say never hook with a hooker, but you have no choice in that contest. I like both. Tyson, my favorite fighter there, just from an overall standpoint. So, but Frazier, man, one of the toughest that the sport has seen. Probably, if not the greatest left hook, one of them for sure. So that's a tough one too, right there. And Frazier had that mental will and wherewithal to not be intimidated by Tyson. So, I don't know. Very interesting one right there. The final boss. I had to think on those for sure. Alex says Marciano Frazier, one for the ages. Yeah, that would be another one right there. Iron-willed guys. Neither wants to back down. Both continually just coming forward, built for whatever was coming. Yeah, that would be an amazing one right there, Alex, as well. I might lean in the favor of Marciano, but it would be an amazing one for sure. Disney Daughter Dad. Hey, cheers, Disney Daughter Dad. Says Lewis would have destroyed Dempsey. Cheers there to you. That what's his name? Blake. That you, Blake, buddy. You there? But yeah, hey, Lewis would have we've been tough to short hook. I think he could potentially get Dempsey out of there. Not a guy that you could just knock out like that. Neither one of them, but yeah, it'd have been a tough one right there. I'd probably lean Dempsey myself there, buddy. If I would lean that way. The final boss, Marciano Frazier would have been a slugfest, Alexander. Yes, indeed. Indeed. Very much a slugfest there. The final boss, Joe Louis, has to have the best highlight reel in boxing in any division. I mean, amazing. Some amazing stuff that Louis smelling to just that short fight to see what he did in that particular period. Man, indeed. Cheers there to you, Blake. Yes, sir. All right. Appreciate you there, Blake. Thanks for dropping by, buddy. But yeah, I lean with you as well in terms of I probably have to go with my man Joe Louis there over Dempsey. Man, those short hooks that Louis, he was just an amazing fighter. He'd be devastating for sure. Very much devastating. Just by says, okay, guys, gotta go. It's been a fun as usual night. Hey, cheers to you there, boss. Thanks for dropping by, buddy. Check us out on the Boxing Chit, boxing shit this Sunday coming up. I think there's a little bit of boxing on this weekend. We didn't do one this past Sunday. I had a local show I was involved with, but we'll be back in the mix here. Lewis, best everything in history. Oh, yes. One of the best, period, right there. The great Joe Louis, the brown bomber. I said bronze. The bronze freaking bomber. But yeah, the brown bomber, Joe Louis, right there. One of the best ever. But yeah, looking forward to it as well there, Bods. We'll be back in the mix there for sure, buddy. Matter of fact, we'll be back in the mix for all. And I think it's about that time for me as well. We got a good hour and 35 minutes there. You know, we were just talking random boxing history. It was great to chat. Great to chat about that boxing history just in general. Shout out to my man Dan once again to drop that super sticker on our brother. Appreciate you there, Dan. Always great having you in the mix, of course. And we'll be continuing to be in contact. So more stuff to come, more videos to come for sure. Have some things brewing, as I mentioned there. Man, it's just great to have all in the mix. The Final Boss said, did you watch the recent Nick Ball fight, Josh? I know you have mentioned him before. Oh, yes. Yes, Nick Ball, I did watch it. You know, TJ Doheny did a little better than I thought he would do there early, but I knew he would eventually be stopped by Nick Ball. His corner ended up stopping it. But that being said, I think that was the right move because the writing was on the wall. But I'll give him props. He did a little better there in the first couple of rounds than I thought he would. But I did think it would be over by 4. But, yeah, hey, I'm a fan of Nick Ball, just watching him apply his trade in there. I always tell you, I know the height factors in, but I think about the great Barbados Joe Walcott with them being the same size and just seeing that Nick Ball goes in there regardless of size. He gets it done. He finds a way to make it happen, and that's some good stuff right there for sure. But, yeah, good point right there. Final Boston, we'll probably talk about that here on Sunday as well. But, man, I thank everybody for being in the mix here. Again, hey, it's always great to come talk boxing history. And we'll be back next Wednesday, and I hope to have you all join even more. Dan says, see everyone tuning me, amigos. Great show as always, Josh. Thank you. No, thank you as well there, Dan. Again, Dan the man. Be sure to go check him out, folks. And be sure to check out all the others here on the channel. Hey, we just love to talk boxing history, reflect on some of the greats of the past to include the figures and great fights. And we appreciate you being in here in the mix with us. So do not stray too far. Check out some videos on the channel while you're here. Be sure to check out 86boxing.com. Enter to win this book right here on the great Jack Dillon, the Giant Slayer, signed by Mark Allen Baker himself. And until we meet again, I will see you. But enjoy the rest of your weekend if we don't chat. But I'll see you in the comments in self-capacity if you leave some stuff right there. So don't be shy right there. Don't be shy at all. So salute to you. Have a good